All right, welcome to episode 82 of the SumerSports Show. I'm Eric Eager. I am your host for today. As we finish the week that was in the NFL, it wasn't a particularly news-filled week. We had Madden ratings. We had, obviously, the Washington Commanders getting sold. There's a little bit of obviously info on that. News flash: owning an NFL team. Even if your team performs about as poorly as any in the league during that stretch, you are still going to make multiple billions of dollars, as Dan Snyder has. But he is agreeing to sell the team, pay a $60 million fine. We had a running back discourse because not only were the nerds like me talking about the situation, but the running backs themselves, Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, and then Derrick Henry and guys like that coming to their defense. So there was some of that. DeAndre Hopkins finally signed with the team. He signed with the Tennessee Titans, and so on and so forth. So there was, some stuff going on this week. We're kind of trending into the start of training camp for most teams. But we're gonna start here, I think, today, talking again about the running back discourse. Talked on Monday about defensive linemen and the interior and why they are getting more high-end contracts as a function of the number of contracts in the NFL relative to edge players. But we're going to talk about running backs here. We did talk about it a little bit a few weeks ago, but I think what I find somewhat comical, or not even comical, but just interesting is, and this is a point for a lot of people to make, and maybe the listeners to this show, maybe that I'm just preaching to the converted here, but I find it interesting that for a number of different years, all you hear from some of the sort of football people is this idea that, like, oh no, it's ridiculous to assume that running backs have lost some value, or that there's even a question of what they add to the field. The NFL over time has slowly kind of paid them less and less and less as a percentage of the cap, paid them less and less as a percentage of their production. And now those same people have what I believe to be very, very naive, very, frankly, childlike solutions to this problem. And even if you call it a problem, like I like to think of, I'm very pro-labor. I think that there's, these NFL players, they're wonderful athletes. They provide us a lot of entertainment. They should be compensated. But the current situation in the NFL right now is such that they're not going to get a ton of money. And there's a number of different reasons for that. We've gone over some of them, but just to kind of give you guys a summary of that. Running backs, they run the football. Running the football is generally less efficient than passing. And so even if the running back, the runner, was responsible for a great deal of team's offensive efficiency when they ran the football, it would still not be as valuable as quarterbacks, wide receivers, offensive line, other positions on the offensive side of the ball that contribute to the passing game. Additionally, we all talk about running backs that contribute to the passing game. But the fact of the matter is, and we did a study at Pro Football Focus a while ago, Arjun Menon tweeted it out a little bit ago as well, formerly a PFF, now of the New York Jets. But running back passing game is not that valuable either. The majority of passes that go to running backs are not that efficient from an EPA or success rate, win probability added perspective. So they, from the what they do is not seen as valuable. We'll talk about trends in a second here, which are actually moving in the right direction for them. But then on top of that, especially in the run game, there's been a bunch of research. So, the work I've done on perfectly blocked plays, the work that the folks at the Big Data Bowl solutions have done, the running back doesn't contribute even that much to the run play relative to the offensive line, relative to the play call, relative to the scheme, and that kind of thing. And then you add to that the fact that, and this is I think the thing that we have to get to, you add to the fact that their age curve is basically a downward sloping line from the moment that they get on the field in the NFL until they finish off. especially as runners. You add to that passing game stuff, there's a little bit of an upward motion at the very beginning of their age curve. So you add to that. So running's not that efficient. The running back doesn't influence the run game as much as other positions, and running back shelf life is not long at all. And you're getting I think the understandable dynamic of what's happening here. Beat Gamer has a really good point as well. Beat Gamer 99, especially with the new concepts of running athletic QB, give you an advantage in the run game alone and help running backs. Absolutely. So we've shown this with the paper that Tej and I that just got published today on the Journal of Quantitative Analysis in Sports, where linebacker movement is much more voracious when the quarterback is a runner. And so again, even another player on the field that influences the game more than the actual runner does. It just makes it a really hard situation. Now, running backs have a bigger influence on the game the earlier that you get into, Pee-wee football, middle school, high school, college. The running backs matter a lot more. And it's also a position where like the best athlete can stand out in those positions early because the passing game isn't developed. So you almost entice the best players on these teams to become the running backs. And once they get to the pros where it's really time to make their money, it's that value dries up for that position. So we've all, and there have been a number of ideas. I think most of them are bad to get running backs to be paid more. Like the ideas that can almost be dismissed as just, not having been thought out well at all are things like, making a different rookie wage scale for running backs, allocating, certain performance-based pay to running backs only. Anything that carves out a specific solution for running backs, to me, is a bad idea, because you're just going to get the market, and it might take a long time. It might be a momentary boon in running back salaries and things like that. But any solution that explicitly carves out favors for running backs is simply not going to work, because the thing that affect running backs negatively right now were not things that were put into place to specifically affect running back. They were simply creating the dynamic for the entire league, and running backs, because of how they are affected negatively. So to me, the only solution that you can put into place is to change the dynamics so that when running backs are at their peak as far as value, they can be paid the most. So NIL is a big help here, right? So a lot of the running backs that are at these, these big schools or even these smaller schools that have NIL money, the fact that they can get paid there, perfect. Bijan Robinson, when he's at Texas, brings the Longhorn fans a ton of value. He should be paid, handsomely as a result. Same thing for Tajay Spears, when he at Tulane, or Dwayne McBride at UAB, something like that. That's big. That helps them a lot, because again, they'll be paid quite a bit even before they get on the NFL field, and things get fair for them as far as their opportunity to make money. The other thing to think about is the rookie wage scale. Now, you have to, in my opinion, so with the draft, again, we're going to talk about solutions here. If the draft is still to exist, this is always going to be a part of what happens, because you're selecting players. The players go to a team. That team has, sort of owns their rights for some of their younger years, and those younger years are the years where running backs have their most value. So a draft is always going to give rise to these inequalities, but a draft where the rookie wage scale is abolished might help more. So, you sign an offensive tackle, those 4 years of team control, an offensive tackle, those 4 years of team control. The first couple of years, you think about guys like Andrew Thomas, you think about guys who ended up being elite, but in years 1 or 2 were not necessarily as good as they are now. Those players might be more inclined to sign longer term deals, because by the time that they're done, they're going to be more valuable than when they started. But running backs, thinking about safeties, possibly linebackers, they might be able to sign shorter term deals out of college. And again, they might be able to get to free agency, or at least restricted free agency, where a team has to be able to, come to the forefront with some money. They will have to, sort of meet the running backs where they are developmentally, and that'll help. There's still going to be a problem because teams can just pick running backs later and later and later and later. And so that the APY and all that kind of stuff for running backs might be lower than it otherwise would if we had, the situation we have now. So that hurts. I think that the way to get rid of those inequalities wholesale and make it truly sort of, what they're worth is to, obviously abolish the draft altogether. So like basically running backs are all able to collectively bargain themselves, and the players that come into the league, they're not just negotiating against the team that drafted them, but they're negotiating against all 32 teams. And that, to me, when a running back is coming right into the league at 21, 22, they'll be able to negotiate a shorter contract. We've seen with Kirk Cousins in Minnesota, the shorter the contract, even when the player isn't super elite, the shorter the contract, the better off that player is, because if he performs up to that contract, as Cousins has for example, at quarterback, then every year and a half in, you're going back and you're getting market rates until you're not worth it anymore. Those longer term deals, obviously, when you can spread that money out, that's obviously better for the teams, but not necessarily good for the player. Got some questions coming in, by the way. Subscribe at SumerSports on Twitter, at SumerSports on YouTube. SumerSports.com this week, some really good articles. Quinn McLean, an article about using pose estimation to study throwing mechanics and quarterbacks. We had the NFC North preview, which we talked about last week, and then an article previewing Tage and my linebacker journal article that we talked about a couple times, but finally got published. We have some good messages here. Martin Tollner, running back contract to me isn't even a true pro against labor, since NFL contracts under a salary cap are largely zero sum. I agree with that. Although, again, when the true labor people who are like, oh no, everybody who's trying to sort of optimize football is going to hurt somebody. I do agree with you, Martin. I'm pro labor in that, like, I want to make sure pro labor is part of, like, the salary cap is probably a bad idea for labor, but the salary cap exists. So how can we distribute this money more humanely? And I do think that the rookie wage scale has caused, as maybe it has in many industries, a hollowing out of the middle class. This is why the NFL Players Association, I don't really have a ton of respect for them, because they saw a situation which was Sam Bradford, Jamarcus Russell, guys like that, all getting these huge deals straight out of college, and they said, well, we're going to protect veterans by putting in a rookie wage scale. But all that really has done has made it really hard to be a kind of middle class veteran player in the league that's past the rookie deal, because it's kind of hollowed out, though. So you get, obviously, the best players who are veterans get the most money, which is good. They've earned it. But then you have a rookie wage scale and kind of a veteran minimum class, and then you have a very hollow middle class, which I think isn't great. And the fact that when they were doing the collective bargaining agreement in 2011, I'll give them a little bit of grace in 2020 because we're all dealing with the pandemic. But in 2011 specifically, not being able to see that coming was their fault. And again, it's not the fault of analytics. The analytics people are just the messenger, but it has caused some issues there. Adrian Peterson, for example, signed a $100 million contract. Right on the eve of the 2011 season. Like, we're probably not going to see another $100 million contract by a running back for quite some time, just because of the market dynamics here. Mojal says, how about a snap limit on rookie deals in addition to years that might allow running backs to hit free agency earlier? I mean, maybe, but teams are not going to draft running backs high if they don't get to use them a lot. That's another point. It's like, again, all of these running back specific solutions are just going to have running back specific responses by the market. And, I just don't foresee any of those working, because I think teams are going to rightfully see that this is a solution to help running backs, and they're just going to do something, to help themselves, which is, just it's a part of competition. And that's what, analytics are trying to help you compete better, but there are bystanders. And just like in any market economy, and this one's not even truly capitalist or truly socialist, but like in any market economy, when you see these unintended consequences pop up, that's where regulation, comes up. Snap limits for everybody, not just running backs, that could certainly work. I think that almost every other position is going to be upset by that, right? Because then, folks like quarterbacks, would you put a snap limitation on quarterbacks? Then you'd have to develop a backup quarterback market that just simply doesn't exist in the NFL. So yeah, there's some good questions here. I think Beat Gamers kind of got some of this nailed here. There would be a large surplus of running backs, so why would they pay more and compete with other teams when they can focus on fits more than overall talents like undrafted free agents? Like, look, undrafted free agents simply aren't that talented. Like that's the problem, is that there is like a very, I think at the time of a good unrestricted free agency market, and you get like better guarantees and oftentimes than you would if you're a 7th round pick. But make no mistake, like that market it would not be the same as if we had, like, for example, no draft and everybody was just a free agent. I think that if that was the case, I think things would be a little bit better for running backs, because you would be buying an asset that, is more mature than, for example, like I said, like a tackle or an interior defensive lineman or another position like that closer to the football. Those are players that you kind of want to have for longer. Additionally, like, I think it would make it better for quarterbacks who are of the developmental ilk. We talked about this a few episodes ago, but Aaron Rodgers, for example, his first contract was, I think, 5 years, $7 million. No 5th-year option, no team 5th-year option. So his position is strictly different than Jordan Love, and in fact, probably helped him in the long run. Whereas Jordan Love, they had to make a decision. They had to make a decision on him after year 3 with really almost, other than what they've seen in practice, sight unseen, and so forth. So, and Beat Gamer comes back here, Beat Gamer 99. I'm a Ravens fan. I feel like every year there's an undrafted free agent running back that's going to make the team for the Ravens. This year's Keaton Mitchell, Gus Edwards was undrafted for sure. Those running backs can be passable, and that's part of the whole running backs don't matter thing, which was never supposed to, mean exactly that. But the issue is that, there are truly running backs who, from a talent perspective, are better than that. The problem is that when you add up the contract they get, what they're going to be worth after the deal, etc., it's not worth it still. But if you change the calculus, maybe going after a top end running back, in what would be free agency or a draft option or something like that, would make sense if the calculus were a little bit different. For the record, I actually think that, when it comes to like Saquon Barkley, for example, I think the Giants are doing 100% the right thing, because you think about it this way. For one, Barkley last year was not even like a top 10 running back in many people's minds after injury after injury after injury. He comes back as a wonderful year, very good football player for that team, and now he's considered a top running back. So you can even see like the volatility in that position is big. And the other part is these guys don't hold out. Like, and on the tag, you'll get some holdouts because if the guy doesn't sign, he won't be fine. So he can hold out and it'll be fine, but he's going to play in games, right? And so if you can get Barkley for 1 year on the tag at 10 million, another year on the tag at 12.5 million, it's basically a 2-year deal. And if he gets hurt at any one of those times, you can sort of bail. Given, and again, all of these are talking about, given the rules that are in place, given the fact that these teams want to win, this seems like a reasonable approach to the Saquon Barkley thing for the New York Giants, and frankly for the Vegas Raiders. Josh Jacobs probably was good enough to get the 5th-year option after 3 years for the Raiders, but he didn't. And the fact that he led the league in rushing last year, this was after a training camp where they weren't even sure if he was going to be the starting running back for that team. So again, like, part of the issue is the volatility in the position. Going into last year, Tony Pollard wasn't even a starter for the Cowboys. Barkley and Jacobs were not considered top flight running backs, and now they all have franchise tag values. And so I don't necessarily blame these teams for some of their hesitancy to buy in long term. And when you look at the sort of the long term success rate of these second contracts, Derrick Henry's been fine. Christian McCaffrey wasn't a good value. He got hurt too much. It's hard to argue Kamara has been that valuable to the Saints after his second deal. And obviously Cook is already gone, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I think Nick Chubb's lived up to it, but it's not a great success rate. So I think these teams are just acting rationally, and that's okay. And it doesn't make them bad, and it doesn't mean running backs are disrespected. It just means that that's the way that the market is. And so if you want to see it change, you have to start proposing solutions that will benefit them, because teams are always going to try to win. They're not going to pay players out of the goodness of their heart. That's not their job, and they shouldn't be doing that. So anyway, that's kind of where I want to go. Now, DeAndre Hopkins signs with the Tennessee Titans. The Titans need, I think, some offensive line help with Nicholas Petit-Frere getting a gambling suspension. They already had Treylon Burks there. Beyond that, at tight end, they're pretty strong. Their young tight end last year led the league in yards per route runs. They have some of a clue there. I don't know how long they're going to stick with Tannehill. Will Levis is very much like a project that if they never play him, they don't necessarily have to be all that embarrassed or all that disappointed. So I think the Titans go into the year, beat Gamer. While they're going from an 8-9 to 9-18, maybe. I do think that's the market sentiment. Actually, the market for the Titans, you go 2 weeks ago on SumerSports.com, I previewed the AFC South. The Titans have a win total of 7.5. It did not move on the Hopkins news. The Chiefs, their number did not move by virtue of not signing Hopkins. So again, these guys, generally speaking, when they're that age and when they're signed this time of year, you're going to see a lot more Julio Jones type performances, which is just kind of, he's there and he's a name, but temper expectations. I think the Titans, though, Vrabel's quite a good coach. I think Tannehill, obviously just a few years removed from leading the league in passing yards per attempt. A couple coordinators into this thing, though. Henry is getting older. Like, we'll see. But I think the team will be competitive. I don't think that they will be a playoff team in the AFC. If you want to look to a team with some value in that division, obviously the Jags should be favored. I think the Colts are a team, and even Houston are two teams that could surprise people. I think the Titans are in a transition year, but they do get Hopkins, which is an interesting one. Ollie Karen, Nicholas Petit-Frere, #OneOfUs. Very cool there. Before I go, I want to talk about, on Monday, we're going to have an article about the NFC West at SumerSports.com. I want to talk about this division because this division is very interesting. We are not that many months. I mean, we're less than 2 years ago. The Arizona Cardinals and the Los Angeles Rams were playing a Monday Night Football game in Arizona. Arizona had a big lead in the division. The Rams just signed Odell Beckham Jr. And since that time, like, so many things have changed. The 49ers have started out slowly both years, 2021 and 2022, only to make the playoffs and the NFC title game in both years. The Seattle Seahawks traded Russell Wilson. Everybody thought they were tanking with a win total of 5.5 last year. They go 9-8. They make the playoffs as the final team in the NFC playoff picture. The Cardinals have basically ripped everything up. They're sort of rebuilding with Monte Austin-Forth and Jonathan Gannon as their GM head coach combo. And the LA Rams, I think, are doing a kind of a soft rebuild and soft enough to where, this win total in the market 6.5. So when I look at this division, I see two teams that have a real actual chance of making the playoffs. And I see two teams who, if things go right, they can be very competitive. And if things kind of go poorly, we're going to be talking about them we're going to be talking about them as rebuilding teams, and that's just the way it is. So the Niners here with a win total of about 10.5, Seattle with a win total of 8.5, Arizona with a win total of 4.5, and the Rams with a win total of 6.5. And I think that makes a ton of sense. If I had to look to any of those as a bet, Seattle over to me feels right. Geno Smith led the league last year in completion percentage above expected. He did fade a little down the stretch, so they go and get him Jackson Smith-Njigba, Abraham Lucas, Charles Cross, two good tackles. Again, if we continue to look at their developmental curves, they could be a good offensive line with Geno Smith throwing to three great receivers and Lockett, Metcalf, and Smith-Njigba. Tight end Noah Fant that came over in the trade for Russell Wilson. He's there as well. Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet at running back. I think this could be a good offense. I think defensively, you have a little bit of some worry. Obviously, Tarek Woolen going with Devin Witherspoon. That's two really good corners. Woolen was a very tall, fast, athletic thing last year, intercepted some passes, was terrific. Devin Witherspoon gave up a 25 passer rating into his coverage last year at Illinois. They bring, obviously, Jamal Adams comes back. Bobby Wagner comes back from a year in LA. I like the back part of that defense a lot. I think that where I have questions is going to be up front because you had, Devin Taylor last year had a lot of sacks, but only, I think it was something he had a 30% pressure to sack conversion ratio, which is just not sustainable year to year. Quentin Jefferson, he's gone. He was a free agent. He left. So I wonder where they're going to get, a pass rush up front. And some of that comes from Jamal Adams probably blitzing. Some of it comes from Wagner as well, being a blitzer. But I think that's really where I feel like they could have problems. But in this NFC, the quarterback situation is such that you don't necessarily have to be a great defense to be competitive year week in and week out. Those quarterbacks are going to give you some, and we saw it. Look, Seattle, in the game that was ultimately pivotal for them to make it to the playoffs. They went to Detroit. They gave up 45, but they got a pick six on Jared Goff by Tarek Woolen that ended up getting them into the playoffs. Same thing when they, Geno Smith kind of played an awful game in Week 18 against the Rams at home that, kind of put them in position to make the playoffs. But Baker Mayfield was on the other side, and he threw pick after pick, and ultimately Seattle was able to win that football game as a result. So I think that they're going to be a winning record team this year, even though the market doesn't believe so. So that to me is the one place where maybe there's some value in the markets going into the year. I think the 49ers, I've said this a million times, since 2011, every year but 2014, they've either made the conference title game or lost 10 or more games. The reason they lose 10 or more games is quarterback injuries for the most part under Shanahan, and yet last year they didn't. And I think that is sort of keeping people's guard up when it comes to the Niners. Yes, they were able to win last year, even with quarterback injuries, but the two quarterbacks that came off the bench for Lance and then Garoppolo, I think were different cases than the Nick Mullenses and the CJ Beathards that have come off the bench before. Now Purdy's in a starting spot with an elbow injury type thing. I think that's going to be a little fishy. It seems like they've given up on Lance. It seems like they like Darnold, but again, I think Darnold's more in that Nick Mullins, CJ Beathard type. If he has to start, I'm predicting 10 or more losses, more so than he's in that Brock Purdy camp, where if he starts, I think he can be good. And I know that that's weird because one guy was a third overall pick and the other guy was a seventh rounder, last pick in the draft. But to me, I feel like that's, after everything we know about these two players, I think that's a reasonable charge. So I don't know if I can advise anything on the Niners. The Rams are weird to me too. I think the Rams will be very competitive in the beginning of the year when Donald, Kupp, and Stafford are healthy. After that, I don't know. You lose Jalen Ramsey in the secondary, you lose Leonard Floyd, you lose Bobby Wagner. I know was supposed to, he was only over there for 1 year. You lose those players. It's hard for them for me to be super confident in them. Now we have a special occurrence here, by the way. We have Chloe_Dragon here. This is my daughter. My daughter Chloe. Follow Chloe on YouTube. She does a really fun job. She's one of the best. She's a very good artist, even at just 9 years old. But she's coming to the chat to say hello. So hello, Chloe. Nice to love you. By the way, see you soon. So when I think about the Rams, I think about when I think about the Rams, I think about a team that I think will be very competitive early on. I think they'll win more games than they're believed to early in the season, much like last year, where they started out, after getting, throttled by Buffalo. They actually had some, pretty decent games after that. I just think it's not going to last very long. McVay's always a better first part of the season coach than a second part of the season coach, historically. And when I mean that, I mean he's incredible in the first half of the season. He's simply really good in the second half of the year. I think that those dynamics work against the Rams. So to me, I think if people want to bet, I think you want to look at and say, okay, you might not want to bet a win total for the Rams. You might just want to look game by game. And then if there's ever a regime shift, then you sort of pounce, because I just don't know if their roster and their dynamics are going to be stationary at all from now until the end of the year. I have a lot of respect for the people in LA, and I think that they'll be able to whip up some game plans, but make no mistake, they've lost a lot of talent this year. So it's a really hard team to handicap. And then you get to Arizona, where I think Arizona is very naked about what they're trying to do here. I think, Kyler Murray's injured. You look at Kyler Murray, his cap hit this year is not high at all. It's like $16 million. Next year it's $50 million. If they want to keep Murray, they obviously have, they cut Hopkins, took a huge haircut in doing so. I think they're going to take whatever cap savings they have this year and roll it over next year. But there's even a chance that they don't even play Murray at all this year, because Murray's played his last snap with the Cardinals, because they have, obviously they're the favorite for the first pick. We make it, I think it was like 7%, 10% or something like that. I'll have to look. Actually, I can just look now. Our simulation has them with a 20% chance of the first pick. I'm sorry. The next highest team is 7. And they also own Houston's first pick. And when you look at Houston's first pick, Houston has an 8% chance to be the first pick. So you look and say, okay, well, combining those two, you have a 28% chance to have the first overall pick. That's going to be Caleb Williams. That's going to be Drake May. You can obviously hold those picks and trade them and get a ton of ammunition. But you can also, take Caleb Williams, get the cap savings, trade Kyler Murray. Now you're going to take something of a haircut by trading Murray, because his contract has some dead money attached to it. However, even the guaranteed P5s and stuff like that will go with Murray to his next team. So you're going to offload some of that. It's not going to be easy, and much like with Wentz and Philadelphia and stuff, it's going to cause you some problems. But I'd rather that cause some problems when you have a quarterback on a rookie deal, because as Philadelphia has shown, Jonathan Gannon's last stop, if you have a quarterback who's making rookie money, it covers a multitude of sins, and you can get out of the depths pretty quickly. So that to me is, Arizona, not a ton of talent defensively either. Isaiah Simmons, Budda Baker, they're players that have heard, we've heard some grumblings on the trade market. I believe Budda, I want to say he updated his contract a little bit, so maybe a trade is less imminent. But I'd have to go back and look. But this is not a talented team. This is a team that I think is going to struggle. We've seen teams like Houston go over this win total, 4.5, when they weren't expected to do much. But we've also seen teams really struggle even to get to that mark. And a team like Chicago, for example, down the stretch, won just one game out of the remaining 14 or so, and ended up with the first pick. And that's, your fan base is still, really, really enthused by that, because you end up with the best players. So I think that the Cardinals, there's not going to be much to them this year. I think they're going to struggle. I think the only way you can look is under for them. But even then, I just, to me, it's just going to be a team that whether they win 4 or 5 games, to me, is or fewer. I think anything's possible there. But I think they are going to struggle. without Murray. And then even if Murray comes back, they will struggle with Murray. Here are some questions now that I, sort of am wrapping up here, Mojal. If you have any time at the end, Women's World Cup picks. I mean, look, like I would love to see the U.S. win. Actually, it's really funny. I read Megan Rapinoe's book, One Life, last week, and she actually mentioned BFF War in there, which was kind of cool because obviously she's an icon and wrote about something that I worked on in her book. So I was not expecting that. I actually we had Matthew Collar in here a couple months ago. I just got his book. There's a chapter in that book about me, which is pretty cool. I was not expecting such a thing in Megan Rapinoe's book, but I'd love to see the U.S. win. There's 6 goal favorites tonight. Total is 6.5. So I don't think they're expecting them to have a problem with Vietnam at all. If you want an action bet, I would probably bet over or something like that in that game. Megan Rapinoe is something like she's a heavy favorite to score, which to me is tough. I don't know a ton about soccer, but a player being minus 100 or more expensive to score a goal in a game makes me feel like the competition isn't too stiff. So Juan from LinkedIn here, Juan Velasquez, excellent analysis. Thank you. Appreciate that. Beat Gamers referring to the Arizona Cardinals. They will probably have the ammo to go up and get the first pick if they don't get it. Absolutely. That's also Chicago's thinking as well, having traded the first overall pick for DJ Moore and others. Like if Justin Fields isn't him, then they'll end up being able to get off of that and move up fairly quickly because they have the ammunition. But yeah, that's a really good point. What do you think Murray's value is? This is Ollie Karen. I mean, when you look at a quarterback who has team control and, when you trade for a player, oftentimes you obviously you get rid of all of the signing bonus type stuff, the prorated money all stays with the team that traded him. So he's going to be a pretty decent value as long as he doesn't want a new contract. And I'd imagine after an injury and after, losing a starting job in a team like Arizona, like he would not necessarily have a ton of leverage to come up and be like, hey, I want this new contract. I think Murray will probably garner a first round pick. I mean, he's a starting quarterback in the NFL. He's young. He's the former first overall pick in the draft. I think it'd at least be a first round pick. So if you're Arizona, let's say you hit the jackpot and you get the first and second pick. You take Caleb Williams the first pick. You sell the second pick for an enormous amount. And now you probably have to trade Murray before the draft because once you show your hand and take a quarterback first, you lose some of your leverage. But let's say you get the first and second pick. You trade Murray, let's say in March for a first round pick. So now you got 3 first round picks, maybe more, I would imagine. I'm not sure if Murray would garner more, but he's probably at least a first rounder. So now you got 3 first round picks. The first pick, the second pick, and some other pick. You can take Caleb Williams first. You can take that second pick and hold it for ransom because we've seen, whether that pick was for Trey Lance in 2021, Sam Darnold in 2018, Robert Griffin III in 2012. Even that second quarterback or third quarterback is going to garner a decent amount of trade interest. So you trade that, you get a bounty of picks to go along with it. And then, so let's say you move back, you get another one, you get a one in the future. Now you're starting to stack premium players. And that would probably be the way out. The other way, we talked about this with Chicago. Chicago's in a very similar position last year as Arizona is this year. You could also use those picks to get premium players. So, for example, now they don't really have an edge rusher. Next year, you could trade the second overall pick for draft picks and a veteran edge rusher, especially if you want to use what will be, I think, more salary cap space than some of the competitors in this division. So there's a lot. I mean, I think if you're an Arizona Cardinals fan, you can be, I think, a little optimistic that in a couple of years you're going to have a chance to be good. I think this year it's going to be a tough ride. So yeah, I mean, to finish off this podcast and try to kind of summarize, I think the Niners are probably properly valued at 10.5 wins. I think that they're certainly a contender, and if people stay healthy, they're a good football team. I think the bottom is always I think the floor is always a little bit lower for the Niners than people want to admit. I think the Seahawks are a team you want to buy into. I think especially at 8.5 wins, I don't think that's necessarily high enough. I think Geno Smith, especially because Smith struggled in the second half last year, I think that the Seahawks come into this with eyes wide open as far as as far as what they need to do to help him. And so I think he has an even better second year as a starter. I think the Rams, I think, will be plucky early, but I just don't think they have enough talent. I think 6.5 wins is probably really fair. And then the Cardinals are rebuilding, and 4.5 is the lowest win total by 2 wins in the entire league. But I think that is probably fair, despite how low it is. So go to SumerSports.com, sign up for our newsletter, which will be coming out over the next few months or over the next month. Read our previews. We have the AFC South up there already. We have the NFC North this week. Next week, Monday, we will have the NFC West up there. Continue to support the podcast, subscribe, rate, and review. Leave us a question in the review. We'll read it on air and continue to show up to the live shows. I'm really excited about this fall. We're going to have shows hopefully every single day during the fall, including myself, Thomas, Parker Fleming, Tej Seth, Sean Syed, who I know people really loved his article on schemes. And I think we're going to continue to sort of stats and schemes kind of show with him and Tej. So I'm really excited for what's to come. And I'm really just thrilled with everybody and the reception for this podcast. So again, like I said, subscribe, rate, review, tell everybody about the show, tell everybody how much you like it. Tell our sponsor at Circa Sports, the sportsbook in Las Vegas, who is running their Millions competition and their Survivor competition. Go to Vegas, sign up, tell them SumerSports sent you. And yeah, that's it. We got some comments here. Jose, clapping emoji. Thank you. Dan Bodine, stay dry, Eric. Yeah, it's been raining quite a bit here, but I will try my best. I'm going to watch some CFL tonight, watch some WNBA as well. If anybody's looking for CFL, I think the market's a little bit efficient, but Hamilton tonight to me is a value. So if anybody wants to catch that game, I think Hamilton's a little bit underrated. They do struggle at quarterback, and Toronto is a very good. Toronto has Chad Kelly, who has played well. I think Chad Kelly's a little bit overrated right now. And Hamilton, who has won a number of games in a row, is 9.5-point underdogs at home to a Toronto team that's coming off a championship, but on a quarterback change. Has had some lucky games. For example, their game against BC, they had 6 interceptions and won that game outright. So I think they're being a little bit overvalued right now. So subscribe, rate, and review. SumerSports.com. Follow us at SumerSports on Twitter. Really appreciate you coming. So for Eric Eager, this has been episode 82 of the Sumer